The night always holds secrets unseen by the eye. Behind the darkness, there are whispers that not everyone can hear, footsteps that shouldn't exist, and shadows that move on their own in the corner of the room. This story isn't just a tale to scare you, it's something that may have happened, or could be happening right now, closer than you think. Listen carefully, and make sure you're not alone while hearing it. That night, the dorm was still lively. Some students were busy with assignments, while others were relaxing in the common room. But in the corner, 4 people were deeply engaged in a different conversation. Daniel Carter, a second-year history student, was the most skeptical among them. Tall, with dark brown hair and a calm demeanor, he never believed in the supernatural. He preferred facts, logic, and history, things that could be proven. Beside him sat Lily Thompson, a petite girl with blonde hair and bright green eyes. She wasn't the bravest, but her curiosity often led her into situations that scared her. Then there was Marcus Hale, the daredevil of the group. Tall, athletic, and brimming with confidence, Marcus thrived on challenges. He always wanted to prove that he feared nothing, even the supernatural. Lastly, Sarah Mitchell, the most superstitious of them all. She devoured books on the occult, watched paranormal documentaries, and firmly believed that something unseen lurked in the darkness. That night, they gathered in the common room, discussing something Marcus had just found on an internet forum. "I found something interesting," Marcus said, grinning as he held up his phone. On the screen was an article about the Midnight Man, a game that supposedly summoned a sinister entity at midnight. "Seriously?" Lily frowned at the screen. "We're really doing this?" Daniel scoffed. "Come on, Marcus. We're adults. We know this is just nonsense." But Sarah's expression was different. "I've heard of this before. A long time ago, in some small town in America, people played it, and some of them were never seen again." Marcus grinned wider. "That makes it even better. It's just a game. What's the worst that could happen?" They finally agreed to play it in an old abandoned house near campus, rumored to be haunted. The house had stood since the early 1900s and was once home to a man who mysteriously disappeared. The next night, they gathered in front of the house. It looked eerie, its large windows staring back at them like empty eyes. The wooden door was worn, its paint peeling, and the entire building exuded a strange, chilling aura. Lily hesitated. "This is a bad idea." Daniel, despite his skepticism, felt uneasy. But he wouldn't admit it. "Let's just get this over with." They stepped inside. The old wooden floor creaked under their feet. The air was heavy, thick with dust and something more unsettling, a metallic scent, like rust. Marcus shut the door behind them with a loud thud. "No turning back now." Marcus lit a candle and placed it in the center of the room. Then, he pulled out a small piece of paper and a pocket knife. "So, here's how it works," he explained. "We write our full names on this paper, then drop a bit of our blood on it. After that, we place it in front of the door, knock 22 times, and step inside before 12:05 a.m. Lily shook her head, clearly uneasy. "Marcus, we don't have to do this. We can just go back." Sarah, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Once we start, we have to follow all the rules. If we break them, the consequences could be serious." Daniel sighed, still unconvinced but willing to play along. "Fine. If this is what it takes to prove this is just a myth, let's do it." They each wrote their names and pricked their fingers with the knife, letting a drop of blood fall onto the paper. Then, they placed it in front of the door. Marcus took a deep breath and started knocking. 1, 2, 3. The seconds ticked by, and they held their breath. 18, 19, 22. As soon as the final knock landed, they quickly stepped inside and shut the door. They waited. Silence. Nothing happened. Daniel smirked. "See? Nothing." But then, something changed. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the room. Sarah, visibly tense, took a deep breath. Okay, now we need to remember the rules. She lit a candle and went over what they had read online. If your candle goes out, relight it within 10 seconds. Keep moving. Do not stay in one place for too long. Do not turn on the lights or use artificial light. Do not leave before 3:33 a.m. And most importantly, Sarah added, her voice barely above a whisper, do not, ever, challenge the Midnight Man. Marcus chuckled, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Relax, there's nothing here. But as he spoke, something strange happened. The candle flickered. Daniel watched the flame tremble. It was probably just the wind. He still didn't believe anything supernatural was happening. They started walking through the house, making sure not to stay in one spot for too long. The house felt much larger inside than it had looked from the outside, with long hallways leading into dark, empty rooms. Lily shivered. Why does it suddenly feel so much colder? Marcus shrugged. It's just in your head. But none of them noticed something. In the farthest corner of the room, hidden in the shadows, something moved. The game had just begun. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The house remained silent, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floor beneath their feet. The group stuck together, their candles casting eerie shadows along the peeling wallpaper. Daniel sighed, growing impatient. I told you this was stupid. It's just an old house, Marcus. Nothing is going to happen. Marcus rolled his eyes. It's barely been 5 minutes, dude. Give it time. Sarah, however, wasn't so sure. She could feel something. The air around them had become heavier, charged with an almost suffocating stillness. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but she knew they couldn't. The game had rules, and breaking them was even more dangerous than staying. Then it happened. Lily let out a sharp gasp. Did you hear that? Everyone froze. A faint knocking sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. Slow. Deliberate. Knock. 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 It wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from inside. Marcus smirked, trying to act unfazed. It's probably just the house settling. But before anyone could respond, his candle went out. The flame flickered violently and vanished, plunging him into darkness. Lily clutched Sarah's arm. Light it back up. You only have 10 seconds. Marcus fumbled for his matches, his hands suddenly unsteady. He struck one, nothing. Struck another, still nothing. The temperature in the room dropped drastically. Come on, Marcus muttered, his voice losing its usual confidence. Finally, on the third strike, the candle reignited. Sarah exhaled in relief. That was close. Daniel, however, was still unconvinced. Coincidence? A draft probably blew it out. But Lily, still gripping Sarah's arm, whispered, then why did it feel like something was breathing on my neck? Marcus smirked, trying to act unfazed. It's probably just the house settling. But before anyone could respond, his candle went out. The flame flickered violently and vanished, plunging him into darkness. Lily clutched Sarah's arm. Light it back up. You only have 10 seconds. Marcus fumbled for his matches, his hands suddenly unsteady. He struck one, nothing. Struck another, still nothing. The temperature in the room dropped drastically. Come on, Marcus muttered, his voice losing its usual confidence. Finally, on the third strike, the candle reignited. Sarah exhaled in relief. That was close. Daniel, however, was still unconvinced. Coincidence? A draft probably blew it out. But Lily, still gripping Sarah's arm, whispered, then why did it feel like something was breathing on my neck? The tension in the air thickened. They continued moving through the house, their footsteps hesitant, their breaths shallow. As they passed by an old, dust-covered mirror in the hallway, Daniel glanced at it absent-mindedly, then froze. Something was wrong. In the reflection, The four of them were visible, their flickering candlelight illuminating their faces. But behind them, just beyond the reach of the light, there was a fifth figure. A tall, shadowy silhouette. Unmoving. Watching. Daniel spun around, his pulse hammering. Nothing was there. What? Marcus asked, noticing his reaction. Daniel hesitated. If he told them what he saw, would they believe him? Nothing, he muttered. Let's just keep going. But his hands had gone ice cold. And deep in his gut, for the first time that night, he felt afraid. As they turned a corner, Sarah suddenly stopped. Wait, this isn't right. The others turned to look. Before them stretched a long, dark hallway, one that shouldn't be there. They had entered the house through the front, and logically, there should have been a back wall. But now, an impossibly long corridor stretched before them, lined with old wooden doors, each slightly ajar. Daniel's skepticism wavered. That wasn't here before. No way, Marcus muttered, his bravado slipping. I swear this house looks smaller from the outside. Lily shivered. This isn't normal. We need to turn back. Sarah shook her head. We can't. The game isn't over yet. We have to keep moving. The group exchanged uneasy glances before stepping forward into the impossible hallway. As they passed each door, the hinges creaked ever so slightly, as if something inside was shifting. Then, one of the doors slammed shut behind them. Lily stifled a scream. Marcus spun around, holding his candle higher, but there was no one there. Sarah's breathing grew shallow. It knows we're here. What the hell does that mean? Daniel demanded. Before Sarah could answer, a whisper slithered through the darkness. Soft. Indistinct. Right beside their ears. But there was no one there. Lily grabbed Marcus's arm, her nails digging into his skin. Did you hear that? They all heard it? A voice. Low and raspy. Repeating their names. Daniel clenched his jaw. We have to keep moving. With heavy steps, they pressed forward, deeper into the corridor. But what none of them realized. Their shadows were no longer moving in sync with their bodies. The game had truly begun. The hallway seemed endless, stretching far beyond what was possible. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated the path ahead, casting elongated shadows along the walls. Marcus, trying to mask his nervousness, muttered, "This house is screwing with us. We just need to find our way back to the entrance." Daniel, who had been the most skeptical from the beginning, now kept glancing over his shoulder. That creeping sensation of being watched had settled deep into his bones. Sarah suddenly stopped in her tracks, gripping Lily's wrist. Wait, this door. It looked identical to the others, an old wooden door, slightly ajar. But something about it felt different. Lily's voice trembled. What about it? Sarah swallowed hard. We passed it before. Daniel frowned. That's impossible. We've been walking in a straight line. No, Sarah whispered. We're going in circles. As the words left her mouth, a soft but unmistakable sound came from behind the door. Tap. 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 Like fingernails scraping against wood. Nope, absolutely not, Lily hissed, stepping back. Marcus reached for the doorknob. We should check. Sarah grabbed his arm. Are you insane? We're already playing this game. We don't need to make it worse. Before they could argue, Daniel's candle flickered. The flame struggled, dimmed, then died completely. A chill ran through his spine. He scrambled for his matches, but his hands were shaking. 1, 2, 3, Sarah began counting, her voice tense. Daniel fumbled, struck the match. Nothing. 5, 6, 7. Damn it. Daniel muttered, striking again. The whispering returned. Closer. Surrounding them. 9, 10. The match flared to life. Daniel quickly relit the candle, heart pounding in his chest. Lily's breath came out in shaky gasps. Did you see that? They all turned. In the dim candlelight, their shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. But something was wrong. One extra shadow stood among them. A tall, thin figure with elongated limbs, standing completely still. And then, it moved. They bolted. Marcus led the way, nearly knocking over Lily in his rush. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a rising storm. Daniel's rational mind had shut down. Logic no longer mattered. He had seen something that should not exist. Sarah clutched her candle with white-knuckled fingers. We can't stop moving. If we stop... Boom. A thunderous knock rattled the walls, shaking the entire house. Boom. 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 It wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from everywhere. Marcus cursed under his breath. What the hell is happening? The Midnight Man, Sarah choked out. He's here. They ran down the hall, only to reach a dead end, an old wooden door that stood slightly open. With no other choice, they rushed inside. The moment the last of them crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut on its own. They were trapped. Lily spun around and grabbed the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. It's locked. We're stuck. The room was small and nearly empty, except for a single wooden chair in the middle and a mirror on the far wall. Sarah shivered. This isn't just a random room. This is part of the game. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Then we follow the rules. We keep our candles lit, and we wait it out. Marcus, still panting, nodded. Fine. We sit here until 3:33 a.m. No problem. But Lily's gaze was locked on the mirror. Her reflection was smiling back at her. Even though she wasn't smiling at all. Lily staggered back, almost dropping her candle. Guys, the mirror. They turned, their gazes landing on the glass. At first, everything seemed normal. Their reflections stood there, pale and breathless, staring back at them. But then, one by one, the reflections turned their heads, facing them directly. Their real bodies had not moved. Sarah clutched her candle tighter. That's not us. Marcus muttered a curse. What do we do? Daniel took a step forward, trying to get a closer look. But as soon as he did, his reflection grinned. A wide, impossibly stretched grin, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. And then, it stepped out of the mirror. The thing that had stepped out of the mirror looked like Daniel, but it wasn't him. Its eyes were hollow and sunken, its grin stretching far too wide for a human face. The candlelight flickered against its pale skin, making it seem even more unnatural. Lily let out a choked scream. That's not Daniel. Daniel stumbled back, his breath shallow. What the hell is this? The reflection tilted its head, its movements jerky, unnatural. Then, it took another step forward. Sarah grabbed Daniel's wrist. Don't move. Marcus, gripping his candle, whispered, if that thing is out here, what's in the mirror now? Lily turned back to the mirror and gasped. The real Daniel was still inside. His hand slammed against the glass, his mouth moving frantically in silent screams. But they couldn't hear him. Panic surged through Daniel. He raised his fist and punched the mirror, but it didn't crack. Inside, his reflection, the real him, looked desperate, pounding against the glass. Outside, the fake Daniel took another step forward. Sarah gritted her teeth. We need to get out of here. Now. Marcus rushed to the door, twisting the handle. Still locked. Lily's candle suddenly flickered violently and then went out. Her breath hitched. No, 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 no. She frantically grabbed for her matches, her hands trembling. 1, 2, 3, Marcus started counting. The air turned icy cold. Sarah's breath came out in a visible puff. Something's coming. Lily struck a match. It fizzled out. 6, 7. The whispers returned, louder this time. The room darkened unnaturally, as if the candlelight wasn't enough anymore. 9. Lily finally managed to light her candle again. The warm glow returned. But she wasn't standing where she had been before. She had moved. Or rather, something had moved her. Lily's chest rose and fell in quick, panicked breaths. What just happened? No one had seen her move. No one had heard her footsteps. But somehow, she was now standing closer to the mirror, mere inches from the grinning fake Daniel. Marcus pulled her back roughly. We need to stay together. Daniel's reflection inside the mirror was still trapped, pounding harder, mouthing something desperately. Sarah squinted. He's saying something. Lily's voice was unsteady. What? Sarah focused on his lips. Then, her face drained of color. He's saying. Don't blink. The whispering around them stopped. Complete silence. Then, the candlelight dimmed. And something breathed behind them. Marcus whirled around, his heart hammering. Nothing. But the presence was still there. Watching. Waiting. Daniel, trapped in the mirror, slammed his fists against the glass, his face contorted in fear. He kept mouthing the same words. Don't blink. Sarah's throat went dry. Guys, I think. Click. The locked door behind them unlatched on its own. Slowly, creaking open. A corridor stretched beyond it. But it wasn't the same hallway they had come from. The walls were darker, covered in deep scratch marks. The floor was old, damp, and uneven. The air reeked of something rotten. And at the very end of the hallway, a figure stood motionless. Watching them. Waiting. Lily's voice came out as a whisper. That's not the way out, is it? Marcus swallowed hard. No. But as they turned back toward the mirror, Daniel's reflection was gone. Fear settled in their bones. Marcus gritted his teeth. We can't stay here. Whatever's in that hallway. Sarah shook her head. But Daniel. Lily whispered, Daniel's already gone. The candlelight flickered. The air grew colder. Then, a deep, guttural voice whispered from the darkness. The game is not over. The door slammed shut behind them. They had no choice. They had to go forward. Into the hallway. Toward whatever was waiting for them. The hallway stretched before them, impossibly long and suffocatingly dark. The flickering candlelight barely reached the peeling wallpaper, revealing deep scratches as if something had been clawing to escape. Marcus took a slow, steadying breath. No other way but forward. Sarah hesitated. But what if? Thump. A heavy footstep echoed behind them. Lily spun around, clutching her candle. The door they had just walked through had vanished. Marcus muttered a curse. This house, it's playing with us. Daniel was still gone. They were down to just the three of them. Sarah clenched her jaw. Then we keep moving. They walked in tense silence, their own footsteps eerily mismatched with the echo that followed. Like something else was walking just behind them. The candlelight cast strange shadows on the walls, making the peeling wallpaper almost seem alive. But something else caught their attention. Framed portraits lined the hallway. Old, faded, their subjects unmoving and expressionless. Lily whispered, Who are these people? Sarah stepped closer to one. The man in the painting had hollow, sunken eyes and a thin, sickly frame. His clothes were tattered, his expression blank. Marcus shook his head. Who cares? Let's just keep. His voice caught in his throat. The portrait closest to him, the one he swore had been expressionless, was now smiling. Lily backed away from the paintings, her grip tightening on her candle. We need to go. Sarah's voice was tight. Don't look at them. Marcus took a step forward, keeping his gaze low. The whispering began again. Soft. Just out of reach. Beneath their skin. Sarah stole one last glance at the paintings. Every single face in the portraits had changed. Their eyes followed her. Their mouths curled into knowing grins. Then, one of them blinked. Lily let out a sharp gasp. No. Nope. I'm not doing this. Marcus pulled her forward. Don't stop, just flicker. Sarah's candle dimmed, then died completely. The whispering grew louder. No, 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 she scrambled for her matches. 1, 2, 3, Marcus started counting. Sarah struck the match. Nothing. 4, 5, 6. The air turned freezing cold. Sarah struck the match again. Finally, the flame caught. The candle's glow returned, spreading warmth. But someone was standing directly behind her. A shadow. Tall, thin, its limbs stretched unnaturally. She didn't dare move. Didn't dare breathe. Then, in a voice not her own, it whispered. The game is still on. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, stepping forward. I'm not looking. I'm not looking. Marcus and Lily pulled her ahead, forcing her away from the thing standing behind her. Then, suddenly, a door appeared in the hallway, directly in front of them. Lily's heart pounded. Was that always there? The wood was rotting, blackened as if burned. The handle was rusted. The smell of decay seeped from the cracks. Marcus exhaled sharply. We don't have a choice. Sarah reached for the handle. And the door swung open on its own. Beyond it was not another hallway. Not another room. But a forest. Dark. Silent. And waiting. The three of them stood frozen at the doorway, staring into the impossible scene before them. A dense, misty forest stretched endlessly, its trees gnarled and twisted as if writhing in pain. The air carried a heavy dampness, filled with the scent of wet earth and something rotting. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. This isn't real. Marcus swallowed hard. Nothing about this night is real. Behind them, the hallway was gone. There was no way back. Sarah took a deep breath. We keep moving. And so, with nothing but their flickering candlelight, they stepped into the forest of the unknown. Crunch. 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 Each step they took echoed unnaturally in the quiet forest. The mist swirled around their ankles, cold and thick like hands grasping at their legs. But then, a fourth set of footsteps joined them. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was walking with them. Marcus turned sharply, his candle trembling in his grasp. Who's there? Silence. But the moment he faced forward again, the footsteps resumed. Closer this time. Right behind them. The deeper they ventured, the more the air seemed to grow heavy, pressing against their chests like a crushing weight. Then, Lily's breath hitched. Look. They followed her gaze. And froze. High above, hanging from the branches, were figures. Dozens of them. Limp. Lifeless. Twisted. Their bodies swayed slightly, as if moved by an invisible wind. Their faces were covered, obscured by burlap sacks stained with something dark. Sarah clenched her fists. Don't look at them. Lily's voice wavered. Why not? Marcus took a shaky breath. Because what if they start looking back? They hurried forward, trying to ignore the hanging figures above them. But the forest had other plans. The trees began to whisper. Soft. Indistinct. Like hundreds of voices speaking at once, just beyond understanding. Then, in a voice too close to his ear, Marcus heard a whisper. You shouldn't be here. His blood turned to ice. He spun around. Nothing. Lily clutched his arm. What's wrong? Marcus hesitated. Nothing. Keep walking. But the whispering didn't stop. And now, the voices were starting to sound like people they knew. Sarah's grip on her candle tightened. I don't like this. Lily nodded quickly. Same. We need to. She stopped mid-sentence. Her candlelight flickered. And then they saw them. Deep in the misty shadows between the trees, hundreds of eyes stared back at them. Unblinking. Motionless. Then they started moving. The silence was suffocating. The only sounds were their own ragged breaths and the faint crackling of the candle flames. But those eyes, hundreds of them, glinting in the darkness, were no longer still. They were moving. Slow at first, like shadows shifting between the trees. Then, faster. Closing in. Lily's grip on Marcus's arm tightened. "What do we do?" Sarah's voice was sharp. "Run." And just like that they did. Branches slashed at their faces, their feet stumbling over exposed roots as they ran blindly into the mist. The candlelight bounced wildly, barely illuminating the ground in front of them. But no matter how far they ran, the eyes remained. Watching. Waiting. Marcus gasped for breath. "Where the hell is the exit?" Sarah scanned the trees. There had to be something, a break in the forest, a sign of civilization, anything. But the path in front of them just kept repeating. The same twisted trees. The same decayed leaves. Like they were running in one giant loop. Lily stopped abruptly, gripping her chest. I need a second." Marcus and Sarah halted beside her, listening to the eerie silence settle around them. Then. A whisper. "Close. Too close." It was soft, delicate, almost loving. "Marcus." His stomach dropped. Sarah's eyes widened. Did that just say your name?" Marcus didn't answer. He was too busy trying to breathe through the ice-cold terror spreading in his chest. Because he recognized that voice. It was his mother's. But she had died years ago. Marcus took a shaky step backward. No. No, that's not real." But the whispering grew stronger. And then, through the thick mist ahead, a figure emerged. A woman, standing unnaturally still between the trees. Her face was obscured, hidden beneath long, tangled hair. But Marcus knew. He didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But his mother's voice drifted toward him again. "Come home, sweetheart." Sarah grabbed his wrist. "Marcus, don't." His throat felt dry. "It's not her." But the figure lifted her head. And underneath the hair, there was no face. Lily screamed. Marcus staggered back, his pulse thundering in his ears. "That's not real. That's not real." The figure didn't move. It just stood there, its faceless head tilting unnaturally to one side, as if listening to their panic. Sarah struck a match, her hands shaking. "We need more light." But before she could relight her candle, a gust of freezing air swept through the trees. Their candles flickered once, then died. Everything went black. For a moment, there was nothing. No light. No sound. Just pure blackness swallowing everything around them. Marcus gritted his teeth, his hands blindly searching for Lily and Sarah. "Stay close." Sarah's breath was shaky. Where did it go?" Then, from the depths of the darkness, something moved. Not footsteps. Not breathing. But the darkness itself, shifting, crawling closer. And this time, it wasn't whispering. It was laughing. Lily felt it first. A cold, skeletal hand brushing against her arm. Her whole body locked up. She wanted to scream. Wanted to run. But something deep inside told her, don't move. The presence lingered, fingers tracing lightly over her skin. Then, a voice, low and distorted, hissed against her ear. "I see you." The moment it spoke, she bolted. Lily's panicked sprint triggered everything. Marcus and Sarah ran after her, the unseen thing shrieking in delight as the forest around them twisted into something even more unnatural. The trees warped, their branches bending toward them like grasping hands. The ground beneath them shifted, the path breaking apart. And above them, the hanging bodies began to move. Lily gasped, looking up just in time to see one of the figures jerking violently, as if waking up. The burlap sack covering the figure's face ripped open from the inside. And underneath, it wasn't a corpse. It was a man. Pale, skin stretched too tight over his bones. His mouth opened, but instead of words, he screamed. A blood-curdling, gut-wrenching scream that shook the air itself. Sarah stumbled backward, her ears ringing. "We need to get out of here." Marcus grabbed her wrist. "How?" And then they saw it. A door. Standing alone in the middle of the forest. The door was identical to the one they had entered before. Old. Rotting. But it was open. Beyond it there was only darkness. No floor. No walls. Just a vast, yawning void. The faceless figures in the forest began to move toward them, slow and deliberate. They had no choice. Marcus swallowed hard. Jump or die. And one by one they stepped through. The moment Marcus, Lily, and Sarah stepped through the door, the ground vanished. They were falling. The darkness swallowed them whole, their bodies weightless, spinning endlessly in nothingness. No sound. No air. Just the sensation of dropping forever. Then, a whisper slithered through the void. "Welcome home." And just like that they hit the ground. Marcus gasped for air, his hands pressing against cold pavement. Pavement. He blinked rapidly, adjusting to the dim, flickering lights around him. Neon signs buzzed overhead, casting eerie glows onto the empty streets. Lily groaned, pushing herself up. "Where are we?" Sarah turned in slow circles. It looked like a city. But something was wrong. The buildings were too tall, stretching into the foggy sky like endless towers. The roads had no cars. The street lights flickered too slowly, as if struggling to stay alive. And in the distance figures stood motionless in the fog. Watching. Waiting. The three of them walked cautiously down the empty streets, their footsteps echoing against the towering skyscrapers. Sarah whispered, "This place, it feels dead." Lily shivered. "No. It feels like it's waiting." Then. A sound. A single footstep behind them. Marcus turned sharply. Nothing. Another step. Closer this time. The sound wasn't just behind them anymore. It was above them. They looked up. A man stood on the edge of a rooftop, staring down at them. His suit was perfectly pressed, his hands in his pockets. His face, though it was blurred. Indistinct. As if reality refused to hold onto it. Then Marcus noticed something worse. The street lights around him cast long, twisting shadows. But the man had no shadow at all. A loud crackle echoed through the city. The giant billboards above them, static at first, suddenly flickered to life. And on the screens, their own faces stared back at them. Marcus. Lily. Sarah. Each of their images warped and twisted, their smiles stretching too wide, eyes turning black as the screens flickered wildly. Then, in a voice that wasn't theirs, the faces on the screens spoke in unison. "Run." The moment the screens spoke, a deep, resonating hum vibrated through the streets. The neon lights overhead flickered faster, as if the city itself had just woken up. Then, the street signs changed. Instead of numbers and directions, they now spelled their names. Marcus Way. Lily Boulevard. Sarah Alley. Lily's breath hitched. It knows us." Marcus clenched his fists. "We need to move. Now." And so, they ran. As they turned a corner, they saw them. The figures in the fog. Hundreds of them, standing motionless in the streets. At first, they looked like people, tall, thin, wearing clothes from different decades. But then, as they got closer, Lily froze. Oh my God, their faces. They had no eyes. No mouths. Just smooth, empty skin where their features should have been. And yet, somehow, they were staring. A sharp whistle pierced the silence. From nowhere, a subway train roared out of the darkness, rushing down the middle of the street. The tracks weren't there before. But now they stretched infinitely in both directions. The train was old, rusted, its windows cracked. And through the glass, there were people inside. Except, Sarah's heart stopped. They weren't moving. They were sitting perfectly still, hands folded on their laps. Like mannequins. Or corpses. The train doors hissed open. A man stepped out. Dressed in a subway conductor's uniform, his hat too low over his face. His name tag was scratched out. And in his gloved hand, 3 tickets. He lifted his head, his mouth sewn shut with thick black thread. But despite having no way to speak, a voice echoed in their heads. Get on. Marcus took a step back. No way. We're not getting on that thing. Sarah whispered, but what if it's the only way out? The train's lights flickered, the figures inside still motionless. The conductor tilted his head, waiting. Lily grabbed Marcus's hand. I don't think we have a choice. The figures in the fog started moving. Walking toward them, slow but deliberate. The conductor raised the tickets again. Waiting. Sarah swallowed hard. Then, she took one. The moment Sarah took the ticket, the world shifted. A deep, mechanical groan echoed through the streets as if the city itself was displeased. Marcus and Lily barely had time to react before their tickets materialized in their hands. And suddenly, their bodies moved on their own. Their feet stepped forward, climbing into the rusted train car despite every instinct screaming at them to stop. The door slammed shut behind them. The train lurched forward. And the figures outside? They stopped walking. Because now they were smiling. Inside the train, it was dead silent. Rows of motionless passengers sat with their hands folded neatly in their laps. Men. Women. Even children. Their skin was too pale, too still. Like wax figures frozen in time. Sarah hesitated. Are they alive? Marcus swallowed hard. I don't think so. Lily whispered, then why do they look like they're breathing? Outside the train windows, the city should have been moving past them. But when Marcus looked, it wasn't the city. It was themselves. Reflected back at them, but wrong. In the glass, their reflections weren't sitting still. They were moving on their own. Sarah's reflection turned to face her. And smiled. Her real self hadn't moved at all. A crackling voice rang through the train's speakers. At first, it was just static. Then, a woman's voice began to speak in a slow, rhythmic tone. This train is now departing. Destination, the end. The wax-like passengers turned their heads in unison. Sarah gripped Lily's arm. I want to get off. Marcus stood up. We need to. The conductor appeared at the front of the car. His stitched mouth twitched. No stops, his voice rang in their heads. No exits. The train picked up speed. The air grew colder. Marcus grabbed the nearest door handle locked. Lily tried the emergency brake, it snapped off in her hands. Sarah's breath hitched. We're trapped. Then, a door opened on its own. Not the exit. Not the conductor's cabin. But a door leading to the next train car. And from the pitch-black darkness beyond it, something stepped through. A deep, wet dragging sound filled the train as something stepped through the open door. Marcus, Lily, and Sarah froze. A long, bony hand gripped the edge of the doorway. Its fingers too long curled against the rusted metal. Then, it pulled itself forward. The thing was tall, hunched, wrapped in something that looked like human skin. Its head was stitched together like a broken doll, its mouth sewn shut with the same black thread as the conductor's. But worst of all, it had no eyes. And yet, it was staring straight at them. The wax-like passengers remained still, as if they couldn't see the creature at all. Lily whispered, "What do we do?" Sarah's voice trembled. I think there are rules here." Marcus swallowed hard. "What rules?" Sarah's gaze flicked toward the motionless passengers. None of them had moved. None of them had reacted. And then, it clicked. "Don't move," she whispered. The creature took a step forward. A heavy, sickening thud. It sniffed the air. Its fingers twitched, reaching right past Sarah's face. She barely stopped herself from flinching. It couldn't see. But it could hear. Marcus held his breath. Lily bit down on her own lip. The creature moved past them, searching. For a moment. It was working. Then. A sound. A small, accidental gasp. Lily. The creature's head snapped toward her. And in an instant. It lunged. Marcus grabbed Lily, yanking her away as the creature's claws ripped through the seat where she had been. The train shook violently. Lights flickered. The conductor appeared again, standing at the far end of the train car. His stitched mouth twisted unnaturally. "We have arrived." A loud screech tore through the air. The train slammed to a stop. The doors burst open. And outside. There was nothing. Just a black void, stretching infinitely in all directions. No land. No sky. Just emptiness. And then. The passengers started standing up. The wax-like passengers turned their heads. Their smiles stretched too wide. One by one, they stepped forward and disappeared into the void. The conductor gestured toward the open doors. "It is time." Sarah, Lily, and Marcus stared at the abyss. Marcus shook his head. "No. I'm not going in there." Lily turned to Sarah. "What do we do?" Sarah's hands trembled. The conductor's voice echoed in their minds one last time. "There is no other way." The wax passengers were gone. The creature behind them was waiting. And the black void beckoned. With no choice left. They stepped forward. And fell. Into nothing. Thank you for listening to this story. But remember, never assume this is just a story. Who knows, something might be listening along with you right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. But be careful, maybe after this, something else has subscribed behind you. See you in the next tale, and may your night remain peaceful, if it can.